Shalom. You know, sometimes people ask at interviews or at parties, what's your favorite color? Apparently, psychologists can glean hints of our personality by what colors we're attracted to. There's even a discipline called color psychology. As far back as I can remember, purple was my favorite color. It's exotic, no, and mysterious. There was a 70s rock band called Deep Purple. It's still around, apparently, in various configurations. The name alone was enough to trigger in me an emotional response. I saw visions of smoke on the water and fire in the sky. I still feel passionate stirrings whenever I hear Prince's Purple Rain. The biblical word for purple is argaman. It's mentioned dozens of times in the Bible, and for the first time in this week's Torah portion, Truma, which describes the building of the tabernacle. Vayedaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, and God said to Moses, speak to the Israelites so that they may bring gifts for the tabernacle, gold, silver, brass, utchelet va'argaman v'tolaat shani, blue, crimson, and argaman, purple yarn. The curtains in the tabernacle and later the curtains in the Jerusalem temple, as well as the priest's clothes, were made with linen and yarns containing this color, purple, argaman. Now, there was a great debate in Jewish tradition about the precise shade of argaman, since there was no actual evidence of any wool or fabric from ancient Israel. But there was no debate that argaman was very expensive and thus highly prized in antiquity. Royal and priestly garments, the clothes of the high and the mighty, were made with argaman. For this reason, it was sometimes referred to as royal purple and often gifted to kings by foreign visitors. According to a rabbinic midrash, it was the most esteemed of all of the different fabrics because it represented and conveyed authority, power, and prosperity. I'm thinking maybe that's one of the reasons I'm attracted to it. In the scroll of Esther, you know, Purim is in 10 days. In the scroll of Esther that we'll be reading on Purim, both Ahasuerus and Mordecai wore royal apparel that contained argaman. Shakespeare picked up on the association of purple and royal power when, following Plutarch's original account closely, Shakespeare wrote this about Cleopatra. Even the barge she sat in, like a burnished throne, purple the sails, and so perfumed that the winds were lovesick with them. While the texts of ancient civilizations mention this purple dye, the earliest actual discovery of a purple fabric was from the Roman era, until now. Israeli archaeologists recently made a remarkable find. While digging at Timna, the ancient copper mines in the Negev desert, sometimes called Solomon's Mines, textile scraps were pulled from the clay, and 3 of them contained that brilliant purple color, still preserved because of the hot, dry climate of the Negev desert. Now imagine that. Digging all day, sifting through dusts, pulling strings of ancient fabric from the earth, and all of a sudden, staring you in the face is this mesmerizing deep purple from millennia ago. Now, these spectacular textiles were carbon dated to 1000 BCE, the period of the greatest of the great Israelite kings, David and Solomon, and a near millennium before the Romans. One of the archaeologists said to look at the fabrics and to stare into its deep purple, still dazzling after 3,000 years, is like peeking into David and Solomon's closet. Now, when you're in bed tonight, close your eyes and imagine being invited to Solomon's court. The king might greet you personally and take you on a tour of his palace, and imagine that he might show you his wardrobe. You would see there dozens of garments and robes, many streaked with the royal purple, discovered at Timnah. Argaman was so expensive because the dyeing process was so arduous. It was a unique skill developed by the craftsmen of ancient Tyre in what is now and then Lebanon. Hence, the purple is often called Tyrian purple. The book of 2 Chronicles reports that while building the Jerusalem temple, Solomon asked the king of Tyre for skilled craftsmen who knew how to work with this purple dye. It was a long and laborious process. The dye was produced from the glands of 3 types of snails that lived in the Mediterranean. The craftsman would extract a single drop of colorless liquid from the glands, which they would then mix with seawater and expose to the sunlight. Over several days, the result was argaman, purple dye. Greater sunlight produced blue. The techelet that is mentioned dozens of times in the Bible, lesser sunlight produced purple. Both colors are often mentioned together, techelet ve'argaman, as in this week's Torah portion. Scholars speculate that tens of thousands of snails were required to produce even a small amount of Tyrian purple dye. The dyeing process was not only laborious, it was to die for. It was exceedingly unpleasant. Ancient texts described how Tyre reeked of snails. You smelled the city before you saw it, because the snails were left out to rot in the large vats before the processing began. So here's the thing. Something so stunning, so luxuriant and brilliant, a deep purple color so exotic that even the mention of the word triggers in me emotions I cannot fully articulate. A hue so connected to regal ambitions and lofty dreams of so many people is produced by a uniquely stinky, malodorous, and mephitic process. The snails themselves are pretty disgusting. Their mucus glands that produce the liquid that eventually becomes purple dye. These glands lie at the terminal section of the alimentary canal, if you know what I mean. Argaman was produced literally by the bottom of the bottom feeders. And yet, wealthy and powerful ancients were willing to pay a fortune for even a strip of this color on their white garments. It was said that Julius Caesar chose purple for his imperial robes that was worth 10 to 20 times its weight in gold. This is the uniqueness of the human creature. We are of the earth, comprised of the same basic elements and compounds as every other living organism. We came from the earth. Adam came from Adamah, from dust, and to dust will return. And you know what? If you don't shower for a week, you might start smelling like those snails on the seashore. We do terrible things. We are capable of animalistic savagery. Sometimes we're even worse than the beasts. As Dostoevsky writes, people sometimes talk about man's bestial cruelty, but that's being terribly unjust to the beasts. A beast can never be as cruel as a human being. A tiger simply tears and gnaws, and that's the only thing it knows. It would never enter its mind to nail people by their ears to fences and leave them there all night. And yet, despite the unhealthy and over-darkened ways of the human creature, and in the midst of all of the ruthlessness, callousness, viciousness, ugliness, repulsiveness, gruesomeness, and dreadfulness that we inflict on one another, there's still beauty. We strive for beauty. We pay fortunes for beauty. Of all the creatures of the earth, only the human creature values beauty for its own sake. We envision beautiful things emerging even from the muck. Snail mucus becomes royal purple. Natural oil and ground pigment can become the Mona Lisa. Limestone formed from the organic debris of shells and corals can become David. As Michelangelo said, I saw the angel in the marvel and carved until I set him free. We are so constructed that once we have seen the possibilities, we cannot abandon the pursuit of beauty. Once a garment has been dyed purple, you can no longer think of it as white, no matter how it started. Once we have caught a glimpse of the purple mountain's majesty, it cannot be unseen. The vision is forever implanted in our souls. We want to see it, experience it, live it again and again and again. A thing of beauty is a joy forever. Its loveliness increases. It will never pass into nothingness. According to Greco-Roman legend, royal purple was discovered accidentally by Hercules' dog when he bit into a snail while prancing on the Mediterranean seashore. There is a Rubens painting housed in a museum in Bayonne, France, depicting this ancient legend. Rubens portrayed Hercules bending down to inspect the mouth of his dog that was stained purple with snails and shells scattered about. It is the human task to view the world not as all of the other creatures. Our ambition should be to transcend the muck and mud of the world and to see possibilities of what might be, even from a rancid snail. The dog only sees in the snail the next meal. Hercules envisions royal purple. Throughout our lives, we should strive to transcend, to rise above, to set the angel free.